Welcome to Parenting GPS, navigating your parenting journey. We live in a time where we have more children diagnosed with mental health illnesses or syndromes than we ever have had in the history since we've been keeping track. Sadly, since the pandemic, even more children have received diagnoses of whether it's depression, ADD, ADHD, the list goes on and on. In our culture, sometimes we think the very first step is to look to therapy and medication. After 40 years of being an educator, a counselor, a parent coach, and working with families, I don't believe that it has to be that way. I believe that there are other strategies that we can do, that we can implement as parents. And today you're going to be finding out about some unbelievable ones from some incredible people. The title of our show today is Beyond Guiding Children to Greatness, Beyond Medication and Therapy. We have two guests that I'm going to be bringing to you. The first is a world-renowned child psychiatrist, author. I'm going to introduce her in just a moment. And later in the show, we're going to bring in a parent who has used these strategies and content with his son, and he's going to share his experiences with you. And so what I'd like to do right now is to welcome our very first guest for the show, Dr. Kathleen Friend, and she's my friend. And what I'd like to do is read the biography to you, her bio, so that I don't miss anything. Kathleen Friend, MD, is a child psychiatrist, international speaker, children's author, musician, and heart rhythm meditation teacher, currently living in Tucson, Arizona. Her mission is to expand the paradigm of child psychiatry to embrace a holistic view of mind, body, and spirit. She is committed to helping parents to see the greatness in their children, to build strong, secure relationships. She is the author of two children's books. I have one of them right here, The Greatness Chair, and we're going to be talking about that today, and Sarah and the Greatness Chair. She's also written a book for parents and teachers that goes along with it called The Greatness Chair Solution, a guidebook to successful parenting and teaching. Dr. Friend, thank you so much for being with us today.
Kari, I'm so happy to be talking with you. We both have this bold vision for change for children and families. And both, I know you and I both work tirelessly to see changes happen. So I have been a psychiatrist treating adults and children for over 30 years. But, over time, I became aware that the methods I was using just were failing, and especially with children. Medications and therapy were just coming up short. And I just believed there had to be something more that we could do to support children and families. And over the years, the stresses on families and children have increased. They've increased so significantly for multiple reasons, including the near impossible work-family balance for many parents, especially two working parents. And now, with the added burden of the COVID pandemic, we've seen a lot more children in crisis, and a big effect on their social and emotional development. Just to ground this in a little statistics, there was a meta-analysis done of 29 studies with more than 80,000 youth worldwide, and they reported that 25% of the world's youth are experiencing depressive symptoms, and 20% are experiencing anxiety symptoms. These estimates are about double the usual levels that we see prior to the pandemic. And importantly, higher rates have been reported in assessing functioning later in the pandemic. So the curves are rising.
Yes, and it's so frightening, and so many parents are in survival mode, and they're just trying to get through the day. And then when you throw something like, your child isn't doing well, anxiety, depression, as you mentioned, where do we even turn? But let me ask you this, now that the pandemic has, I don't want to say it's over, but we're not locked down like we were. Children are having many more quote unquote normal experiences, so many, hopefully most back in school, back in sports, back in activities. Do you feel like these numbers, these statistics, these overwhelming statistics are going to naturally decrease? Or should we still look at intervention? And what, as a world-renowned child psychiatrist, what would your recommendation be?
That's a good question. I don't think any of us really know the answer to that question, but I believe that intervention is going to be needed, but I don't think the traditional way of medication and therapy is going to get us out of this
Mhm.
mess. The old ways of seeing problems and deficits that need fixing is not the most powerful tool. It's much more powerful to see and nurture strengths.
Exactly.
There is a significant database showing the negative effects of adverse childhood experiences on adult mental and physical health.
Mhm.
But the good news is that these adverse effects can be significantly reduced by the health promoting effects of positive childhood experiences. And so I believe that we keep hearing that we need more professionals and all this, but I believe we need to empower more parents with skills that they can use themselves in the home to help foster an environment that maximizes positive childhood experiences.
That's such wonderful advice. And one of the things that I know as a parent coach is that sometimes parents don't know what to do. They don't know how to create more positive experiences. And so many we all, unless we really look at how are we parenting and what are we doing, so many parents just parent the way they were parented. And so many instances of, do this, don't do that. And by the way, if there's anybody out there that's going to hear something we say, it's not about making you feel guilty if you're saying, oh, I do that with my child. It's not about shame, it's not about fault. We all do the very best that we can. And you know what, as parents, when we're exhausted and we're tired, you know how do we even begin to know where to start? And so one of the things that we're going to be doing, well, we're going to be doing several things, but by the time this show is over, you're going to have a concrete way that you can take that next step to begin to help your child see the positive strengths that they have in their own lives. Would you like to comment on that, Dr. Friend?
Okay, well, where I was yes, where I was going though is I really wanted to go back to this business of adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
Um, and in the interest of time, I think that I'm going to move on a little bit. But I mentioned that various forms of abuse, neglect, and significant family dysfunction has been shown to have a big impact in adult mental and physical health. However, here's the good news. In 2019, a study was published that they looked at 7 specific positive childhood experiences, and I will summarize those for you in a minute. And they found that that children who had 3 to 5 of these 7 experiences had a 50% reduction in depression and poor mental health. And children with 6 to 7 of these experiences had a 72% reduction. And this was completely independent of the number of, they call them ACEs, or advanced adverse childhood experiences. That this positive effect was independent of how many adverse experiences. And so I've condensed these positive experiences. There are 7, but basically they boil down to nurturing, number 1, nurturing relationships with parents, other adults, and other children. Secondly, a safe and stable environment. Third, a feeling of belonging, that the child matters to the family and to their community as well. And lastly, the activities which promote emotional growth, which includes unstructured play.
Important. It's so important. And, going along with what you said, Dr. Friend, we know from the world of neuroscience that the way we, not just children, but the way we feel, I'm going to limit this to children right now, the way we think about things, our thoughts, our emotions have a physiological impact. And we don't have time to get into all of that today. But what we know is that our emotions allow certain neurochemicals to be released in the body, and they impact us in every system in our body. And so if children are feeling stressed, if they're feeling upset, if they're not happy, some of those stress hormones are going to be released, and that's not going to help them to feel better. If they're feeling excitement and happiness and joy, dopamine, serotonin, some of the other, sometimes we call them the bliss hormones, will be in their bodies, and their thoughts really do have an impact on how they're going to feel.
Yes, that's a really good point. And I mentioned I'm gonna respond to you, but I just want to just make a fine point that the fact that I focus on helping parents and teachers see what's going right than what's going wrong,
Yes.
to focus on away from problems to strengths, that I want to just say that this sounds like a very simple, but yet this is a very powerful intervention that can help heal the brain from the effects of adversity. I just wanted to make that, because that's a really dramatic point, and that's something we didn't realize until more recently.
I'm going to stop you, Dr. Friend. I know that we're going to continue, but we're going to take a break right now. And when we come back, we're going to have you talk about some specific things, mostly around your book, The Greatness Chair. And we're going to give parents some strategies of what they can do tonight, if they have the book. We'll be right back. Thank you. And we're back. Dr. Friend, so many parents feel like they're just magically supposed to know what to do. And they sometimes feel shame, and they feel like it's their fault if they don't know what to do. What are some positive ways and some experiences, some strategies that you can share with them to help them get on a more positive track, perhaps with their children?
That's great. So first of all, there's no tougher job than parenting. And most parents are really left to figure things out on their own in a culture that does not support them. So I hope that takes away a little of the shame and guilt. We're supposed to have a village around us, and a lot of us just don't. So the thing that I have noticed is that, when people like myself are trying to support families with our traditional methods, and parenting books and so on, there's a missing component. And many of these approaches really don't take into account that parents are really stressed out and in survival mode, like you said. And we know that that since a healthy body, mind, and emotions are so closely connected, it's vital that we address the adult's stress levels. So one of the skills that I teach in my Greatness Chair Solution book does address this by teaching a type of meditation called heart rhythm meditation. And that helps reset the nervous system to be ready for connection with our children. It helps us move into a part of our nervous system called the social engagement network. When we're in stress mode, we are not wired for connection. But when we're anchored in our social engagement network, it's easier to see greatness in ourselves and in our children. You could say we start to see from our heart rather than our mind.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. And we all want to see the strengths in each other, in our family. And sometimes, as you said, when that stress is there and we're just feeling so overwhelmed and we're tired and it's sometimes really difficult. I do the same thing in my parent coaching, Dr. Friend. We always start with how can the parent learn how to stay calm and centered before we try to maybe change the behavior of a child, and how we do that. And
Right.
you are an amazing child psychiatrist, and I think an amazing children's author. And you wrote this book, The Greatness Chair, to help children, or to help parents to help their children to do what you just said. And I love this book. I have purchased it as a gift for many, many friends. And what I would like to do right now is to ask you to share a little bit about the origin of the Greatness Chair. Where did this come from? Share a synopsis perhaps with our viewers. Tell us about your great book, The Greatness Chair.
Thank you. Well, basically, I was in my office, and honestly, I got tired of hearing problems. And the kids didn't want to come in. The kids they had their heads down, they felt bad. So one day I just said, okay, come sit next in this chair next to my desk. And when the kids sat down, I said, oh, how did you know you sat in my greatness chair? And that was the birth of the greatness chair. And then I started to ask the child, can you tell me something about your greatness? Now, some kids could answer, some kids needed coaching, and there's a kind of a whole process. And in the book, The Greatness Chair, you see a little boy going through a typical day, a kid who's having the kind of experiences that a lot of kids have. They're not like big T traumas. They're like little things like, like somebody is telling them that they're talking too much, or they're late for school, or, these little things. But in the book, you see how it adds up for the child. And
Mhm.
in the greatness chair, what happens is the little boy goes to sleep in his timeout chair and has a dream. And Zoe comes, and Zoe shows this little boy how buried in all the things that they thought were going wrong was a greatness. So, for example, he was running too fast on the playground, and the teacher told him to slow down or he was going to get hurt. Well, that showed his enthusiasm, for example. That's one of the examples in the book. And so really everything gets turned kind of upside down, or maybe it's right side up. Things get turned. And so in the book, the little boy comes back after his dream and teaches his parents how to see what's going right, even in the midst of problems.
Absolutely. And Dr. Friend, one of the things that I probably say more than any other quote is that the behavior that gets the most attention is the behavior that we will see more of. Because children, human beings, learn at a very early age how to get the attention from those that they love. We figure that out as babies, right? And we're wired for that as humans. We're wired for that. And when kids learn, maybe not even at a conscious level, but when they learn, oh, I can really, get attention from people, sit down, do this. If I maybe don't do all the right things, or the appropriate things. I don't want to say right,
Oh,
but
absolutely, absolutely. Kids need our attention and love for survival.
yes.
That's totally wired in. And so I kind of chuckle when people say, "Oh, they're just doing it for attention." Yeah, yeah.
Exactly,
I'm like, yes,
exactly.
they
And
need
so
to do that.
what I would like to do is share with our viewers right now, one of the ways that they can, buy the book or make up a story, your own story, and you don't have to buy the book, but it helps to have it. Something that I've done with parents that I know has been very helpful. And on this page of the Greatness book, the Greatness Chair, you see this very special chair. And I have encouraged parents that I work with to first of all get your book. And I encourage them to have their kids help them decorate it. Maybe put crepe paper, streamers, or balloons, or a little sign, the Greatness Chair. And that they should take turns sitting in the Greatness Chair, and the other people in the family can tell them about something that they overcame or something that they did to show their greatness. and to write it down on a big piece of paper, can be a big chart paper, and keep it going, make it an ongoing thing. And one of the things that I know with some of the families that I've worked with is the kids then wanting to do it for the parents. It's
Yeah, that's
beautiful.
fantastic. That's just fantastic. And I want to just make a fine point that, when we're talking about greatness, we're not really talking about achievements and accomplishments, although, we can be proud and tell our children that about their, but really we're trying to look for the qualities that the child has. What are the qualities? So like if a child, like they might sit down in the greatness chair and say, "Oh, I got an A on my spelling test." Well, okay, what did it take to get that A? Oh, well, let's see. I had perseverance. I kept going even when it was hard, or, so you want to try to get underneath the actual accomplishment to the qualities that the child showed to get that job done.
Absolutely. So it's really about developing and building on positive character traits that the child can take with them for the rest of their life. And
Right. And we really want to focus on, not only, we're not only putting our own agenda of what we want, but what is this child, what is this particular unique human being in front of us showing about themselves? And we want to nurture that.
absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we are going to meet Bryan Connolly. He is a parent, he's a working dad and the parent of an 11-year-old boy. And we're going to talk to him about how he has used the strategies with his son and how it has had a positive effect with others in his life. And we'll meet him when we come back. Stay tuned. And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our second guest to you now. This is Bryan Connolly, and Bryan is a working dad and the proud dad of an 11-year-old son who, by the way, happens to be on the autism spectrum. And later on in this segment, we're going to be talking with Dr. Friend about how her work can benefit all children, no matter how old they are, what kind of a label they may or may not have. So, Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate it. And so you have been using Dr. Friend's work with the Greatness Chair with your own son. And in our time that we talked before the show, before we're recording, you shared with me that it really helped change you personally, not only with your son, but just in your day-to-day life. Could you share with the viewers what that felt like and how you view yourself differently, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to give myself credit where credit is due. I feel that I'm a very patient and attentive father. But reading The Greatness Chair really helped me develop my patience even further. Not just patience, where you feel like you're just tolerating a behavior, just kind of white knuckling through all the behaviors, but really coming to a deep understanding of my child and how he's feeling. So there's, of course, there's a behavior component where I am helping my son develop skills and overcome these challenges. But beyond just the behaviors, I would also say that there's more laughter and more joy in my house, and just there's been so many more moments of where I just look at my son and I'm just filled with pride and inspiration, just because he's done things that I honestly don't think I could do sometimes. Just that's how I would describe it.
Wow. And so bringing more joy and laughter into your own family, your own home is, that in itself is huge, Bryan, because so many families feel like they're just hurrying up to get to the next thing. And come on, we're going to be late. And come on, and laughter and joy. And, I think we forget sometimes that that's the goal. Yes, we want our children to, be able to achieve things, but it's about enjoying our children. And it's sometimes we don't always feel that as parents. Bryan, one of the things that you also said to me was that Dr. Friend's work and her book, The Greatness Chair, has not only impacted how you are as a dad and your family, but how you look at other people and other relationships in your life. Would you comment on that for our viewers, please?
Yeah. So sometimes we see school staff or other caregivers interacting with our child, and they're struggling. And in our haste to be helpful, we rush in and say, "Oh, he doesn't like to hear this," or "This is what works. You need to do it like this, and this." And as great as that can be, what I've really learned is it's so much more powerful to actually look at that adult and say, "Wow, you are being so patient with my child right now. Thank you for the dedication that it takes to show up every day and do this job. You are just so amazing." And that not only helps the adult in that situation maybe find their own ways that work for them even better, but that moment of greatness that you've just given that adult, that actually trickles down to your child. So whether we're doing that externally or even internally, we're thinking in our heads, "Oh, they're doing this wrong, or they're doing this wrong." If we can move toward looking at the greatness in that adult, that is so much more powerful because that will go to the child as well.
And it's all about appreciation and gratitude and in recognizing that in people, isn't it?
It
Um,
is.
you know, one of the things that Dr. Friend's work is really helpful with are maybe unanticipated situations once the kids learn that. And you shared a story with me about your son having some anxiety about being in a hospital. And then he had to go to the hospital. And you shared with me how different that situation was because of your work with the Greatness Chair. Would you take a minute or so, please, and share that story? Because I think that this is real life, and I think other parents will really relate to it, whether it's a hospital situation or something else.
Yeah. So we discovered that my son had a heart murmur. So he had to go in for an MRI, which he had to be sedated for. Long story short, we got him to the hospital. He took an oral med for sedation, and he asked for a drink. And in that moment, he actually had to be told no, that that would not be safe in that condition. And he just completely came unglued to the point where I was actually breaking down in tears. It was that intense of an experience. Um, Fast forward a couple weeks, um, I was talking to Dr. Friend, and I said, "Hey, do you think this would help in my situation?" And she, of course, replied that yes, it would. And so I had also found a calming strategy that I use with my son, and part of the book was also suggesting that when we use those calming strategies, that we root those in the relationship, because so often we find, oh, you can look on YouTube right now for calming strategies for autism or or just for general kids. But if you don't root that deep in the relationship, it's not gonna, in the moment, it's gone. It's not gonna take hold. So he went back to the hospital for an ultrasound, which was also a stressful type of situation. And not only did he just do amazing in that situation, he had everybody in that building smiling at him and laughing. He actually, at the end of this whole episode, my wife went and got him a pig balloon, and he was pretending to walk it out the door. He called it Richard. And so
That's
and my wife just
adorable.
said, on top of everything else, I wasn't there that day. I wasn't able to be there. So that was another huge stressor. So she was telling me about this after the fact, that he was doing that, and everybody in that building was just smiling ear to ear.
Oh, that's such a, I don't want to say happy ending because it's not an ending, but a happy ending to that little scenario. And what you said about, deep in the relationship. So it's really about this becomes a mental program, if you will, of who they are. And they're not just words, be quiet, be calm, don't yell, whatever. They're not just words, it's becoming a part of who they are. You also mentioned, Bryan, about, and I thought this was a brilliant point, about kids know how to push our buttons. And you related it to Dr. Friend's work in looking at the positive. Would you share just very quickly that thought with everyone, please?
Yeah, kids, they love to push buttons. We are their most favorite toy. Um, the good part is that we can change those buttons to where they get the good reaction. So the behavior that we don't want usually gets the most intense reaction. So if we're able to flip that, upside down, or rather right side up, to where we are showing up for and being our most excited when things are going right, then that's the button that they're going to push time after time.
Right. And that goes back to what I said earlier. The behavior that gets the most attention is the behavior we will see more of. Well, thank you for sharing those things. And we're not leaving you, but I want to bring Dr. Friend back in right now. Dr. Friend, Bryan mentioned about his son is on the autism spectrum. Could you share with us a little bit about how this book and your work is applicable to children of all ages and any label they might have in their lives?
Yeah. First of all, I'm always just so happy when I see a child and family helped. So for me, this is so heartwarming just to hear this story. Much to my surprise, it turned out that, I threw this out here, threw it at the wall, whatever, and then people started using it, and I got feedback from people all the way from kids in preschool. I thought I was just writing this book for elementary school kids, but no, they've used it in preschools. The preschool kids get it because they kind of follow the pictures. They sort of get this. I mean, the language in the book is not dumbed down even for a kid, but somehow they get this. There's an energy they get. Anyway, so I've seen it work with preschoolers, elementary, and actually high schoolers, which shocked me. I thought they're going to think this is very juvenile. But actually, I have had people tell me that they've used it, especially with kids like in group homes or foster homes and things, where their development, like emotional development, may have been a little more delayed, and they really resonate with this.
It's such a powerful tool. And we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we have some questions from parents around the country that want to ask you some specific things related to this book. And so we'll continue our conversation and find out what those questions are, because if these parents have these questions, I'm betting that there are a lot of other parents that have the same questions out there. So we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back. This is the part of this show where I'm keeping with the navigation theme of parenting GPS, where we're navigating your parenting destination, where we take questions from our viewers and our guests will respond to those questions. The first question that we have today, and I'm going to read it verbatim, is from Tracy S. from Mesa, Arizona. And Tracy writes, I'm the mother of 3 children ranging in age from 4 to 13. I try to focus on the positive with my children as much as I can. But I've been reading about something called toxic positivity. What I've read is that just trying to be positive all the time isn't real life and doesn't allow children to feel emotions such as anger, frustration, sadness, shame, etc., and encourages them to hide their feelings. What is the difference between toxic positivity and what you are advocating? Dr. Friend, would you like to answer that, please?
Tracy, I am so glad you brought that up, because that's a very typical confusion. And the difference in what I'm advocating is that First of all, I want to acknowledge all the feelings and experiences of a child, but we look for the positive quality that's buried in there. So just a common example might be, let's say you see a child obviously frustrated and upset, yet they're not screaming or hitting. We could say, well, I see how frustrated you are with that your sister doesn't want to share with you, but you're using the greatness of self-control and handling your big feelings without hitting or grabbing the toy away from her. So in that way, we're definitely acknowledging the difficulty and the feeling and validating it, but also at the same time trying to show the child that there's more to this than just that negative feeling. There's also a positive, something positive going on at the same time.
Right. And Bryan, would you like to add anything about that question from your experience?
Yeah, I really like this question because we as parents, we get all this input, right? Maybe this Tracy came across something that said, "Oh, good vibes only," and who doesn't want their kids to feel good 24/7? Where it runs into problems is when real life happens, as she pointed out. So it's showing that she's going back to intuition. And I think that's really powerful in parenting, is to not only learn but also go back into your heart and say, is this really working out for me? Is this really benefiting my kids, instead of just blindly following the latest parenting advice. And I
Right.
think the greatness chair really helps us as parents develop that intuition.
Yes, well said. And again, it's not about not acknowledging your kids. It's really about teaching them. And so our second question, this leads into it. My daughter is on medication for various behavioral issues and anxiety. I'm sorry, this is from Matt B. from Austin, Texas. Sorry, Matt. I feel like such a failure as a parent. We've tried so many things, but my daughter was suffering so much that I felt I had to listen to her doctor and give her medication. Can I use the methods in the greatness chair solution to help my child get off the medications? Dr. Friend, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Although I certainly could not in any way guarantee that your child can get off medication. Um, the way I feel about it is that, first of all, please don't feel guilty for using medications. The situations are rarely black and white, and there's a lot of nuance. And although I do encourage parents to try other things before going to medications, it's not always possible. There's a lot of circumstances where the family just, they need relief, and sometimes it's very necessary, hopefully as a short-term strategy, but not always possible. But regardless of whether a child's on medication, children benefit greatly from us helping them to see what's the best parts of themselves, and to build this inner view of themselves as healthy and not broken. Because so many kids feel like, I'm broken if they're on medication, so we just have to, maybe we can't crowd that out completely. Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is crowd it out. Maybe we can't take away that, but we can crowd it out with other observations, so that they're carrying around a portfolio of other things other than this feeling of being broken.
Right. And Bryan, I want to ask you your thoughts about that, but I just want to comment on something you said, Dr. Friend, because the title of our episode is Guiding Children to Greatness Beyond Therapy and Medication. And so we're not saying it's never going to be something that you need, and we're not saying that there's any shame if you do. We are encouraging some other strategies to try, and there are a lot more. This is just these are just some before you get to that point, to see if that's where you are. We only have another minute left. Bryan, would you like to quickly just add to that?
Yes. So I'll just say real quickly that I've seen my own son not respond to meds very well. Using the greatness chair has kind of helped replace that need. So in a way, it's like if you look at a child who has gone days without food, they're going to behave erratically, right? That child doesn't need meds; they need food.
You sound like you're
Similarly,
speaking from experience.
yeah. So the greatness chair can help you kind of feed your child's deep need to be seen for their true great selves.
Thank you, Bryan. And we are almost out of time. I wish we had an hour. But what I'd like to do right now is, Dr. Friend, would you please take a moment and let people know where can they find your book? Where can they find information about you? Would you go ahead and share that, please?
Sure. The easiest way to find things about me and my books are to just go to my website, which is www.greatnesschair.com. So it's just greatnesschair.com. And all my books are on Amazon and other outlets, but you can see them right there on my website.
Well, thank you so much. And Bryan, would you like to say just very, very quickly any closing thoughts before we end our show today?
I just want to say that if you're watching this, the greatness that you want to see in yourself as a parent and the greatness you want to see in your children, it's already there. You just need to find it.
Well said. Thank you so much. And I would like to close our show today with a quote from my friend, Dr. Kathleen Friend. And she said, parents need to be empowered with tools to enhance positive childhood and family experiences with less reliance on professionals who typically come from the viewpoint of fixing problems and deficits. We want to, and part of the purpose of this show is to be able to give you, the parents, even the grandparents, the content, the strategies, and the resources so that you can be empowered to be the greatest and happiest parent you can be. Thank you for joining us.